Right, welcome everybody. I don't know whether you want to, Mark, you want to do the preamble first? Mark, you're muted.
Apologies, Chair. I will just do the housekeeping and then we can actually start the meeting proper. So bear with me a second. I'll just bring those up for everyone. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback whenever participants are speaking. Also, if a member wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen on screen, or use the raised hand function. Also, please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues to the chair or the Democratic Services Officer. Can all other attendees, for example, officers and members of the public, please turn off their cameras and mute themselves until called on to speak by the chair. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or Democratic officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should try turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth so they can at least hear and be heard. And that's everything from me, Chair, for that.
Right, thank you very much. Right, we go to item number 1, apologies for absence. Have we got any apologies registered?
I've not had any through directly, Chair. Obviously, Councillor Wilson's running a bit late, but he should be joining us shortly.
Yeah. Councillor Carroll?
Not apologies, Chair, but I'll have to leave the meeting at 6:15 because I have another engagement, so just wanted to make everybody aware of that.
Right, that's fair enough. Right, okay. Right, item number 2, receive declarations of interest, including WIPA declarations. Please note members seeking advice on this item are asked to contact the monitoring officer at least 48 hours before the meeting. Does anybody have any declarations they would wish to put forward? No? Can't see any. Right, we'll move on now to the presentation, which is item number 3, which is an update from GLAM and the Ethnic Minority Staff Network. Who's taking that?
Hello, good evening. That would be me. Hi.
All right.
And Martine as well from Diverse.
Right. Do you want to start then?
Yep, of course. Would you like me to? Have you got the presentation up in front of you, or
could you introduce yourself because your name hasn't come up on my screen?
Apologies. My name's Tom Narborough. I'm the interim chair of the GLAM network.
Thank you very much.
Do you want me to present it, Tom?
That'd be great. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, bear with me. I'll just present my screen. I'll bring the slides up. Bear with me a second.
Thank you all. It's my first time doing one of these, so.
It's wonderful when it works.
Right, bear with me. I'm just bringing up my screen now, and I'll just set it for slides. Bear with me a second.
Sure thing. Thanks.
Okay, hopefully that's it coming up for everyone.
Yep. Okay. Oh, sorry, that one. There we go.
Yeah, sorry.
And then next slide, please. Thank you. So my name's Tom Narborough. As I said, I'm the interim chair of the GLAM network. As you're probably aware, the GLAM network has been around in the Vale since 2019. We were launched back in January of that year, and we had an annual general meeting which covered the launch. At the time, we established key themes which were workplace impact, visibility and awareness, and social and support. These themes were meant to ensure that it was a high impact network, but we also required a limited time of members, allowing everyone to continue with their normal duties. We had the chair at the time, which was Matthew Curtis, and he was the chair up until very recently. And we have been able to continue most of the work behind these work streams also until very recently. Unfortunately, late last year, we then lost 2 lead positions, and those work streams as they were discontinued in October. We decided to have a look at the structure then after that, and we were also fortunate to be involved last year in helping the Diverse Network in their development. As the network, we've been also involved in helping the council facilitate our Stonewall submissions. That's been a really interesting journey and certainly something I've found very interesting to get into over the last 6 months. We've made a lot of progress as a council in terms of those submissions over the last 3 years, but obviously COVID interrupted those significantly, and we've got some areas to progress and some areas to improve in future, but we're also pleased to say there is some progress, and we're waiting to see the results from the most recent round, which should be published over the course of this month. Unfortunately, we did lose Matthew as chair last year to a new role with the Welsh Government. It was a wonderful opportunity for him to pursue. We do wish him very well, but because he's helped found the network from the beginning, it was quite a big loss. I was very fortunate to be appointed then as the interim chair, and I will be until the next annual general meeting, where we'll establish new positions and we'll do elections for our steering group posts. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of information about me. I won't spend too long on this slide. So I've been working with the Vale since 2019 as well. I'm working in a role that helps to promote integration between health and care services. I've been a project manager in the public sector for 6 years. I've experienced quite a few different jobs. I've worked with helping vulnerable people. I've been involved in implementing and writing policy and also managing improvement and commissioning projects previously for Cardiff Council. I've also spent quite a lot of time working in the private sector, primarily in hospitality and in restaurants before starting my career in the public sector. So I've spent quite a lot of time in the workplace, and I've started work when I was quite young and started work full-time in the holidays, so I've always been the kind of person that pitches in. I've therefore enjoyed the opportunity to get involved with extra activities such as GLAM, and I was a part of Cardiff's LGBT network prior to moving over to the Vale. I was very nominated to step in, very honoured to be nominated to step in as the chair, and also I was really impressed by the warm welcome that I received from the Vale in the GLAM network and in general. And also I think the atmosphere in the Vale is wonderful in terms of engagement with senior managers and elected members with things like the GLAM network, and I think it's a great nurturing environment that I hope to continue to contribute towards. Next slide, please. So in terms of our membership, we're now at around 40 members and allies, and unfortunately, as I said, last year we lost a couple of members, including Matthew, but we have had a new member join this year, and seeing as there have been quite a few new appointees over the last 6 months and to a year in the Vale, we hope to see that continue. We have also experienced some issues, however, when it comes to not only keeping track of membership, but also making sure that membership information is updated and making sure that people are still involved. Coronavirus, as ever, hasn't made that any easier with people working from home and dealing with constantly shifting priorities. It's been quite difficult to drum up the same level of interest we'd previously had in this kind of activity. We've also discovered that without some kind of more robust way to look at how we keep our membership up to date, sometimes we're not getting the right messages across to the right people. So this is something we've got on our list to work out moving forward. And we're pursuing other platforms to engage with assistance from colleagues, for example, in business improvement. It's our hope, obviously, that as the pandemic starts to recede, touch wood, that we can start to get that level of commitment back up again, and especially start to get our social calendar back up again, really, because obviously one of the main linchpins for organisations like GLAM are things like Barry and Cardiff Pride, which have been huge, and we've helped contribute towards quite significantly in the past. So yeah, this year we hope to start getting back on track with things like that. Next slide, please. So as kind of a soft relaunch, this year we've elected to alter the timetable for the annual general meeting, as previously they were held in January. January, obviously, this year was dominated primarily by the Omicron outbreak. It didn't seem like the right time to do it, and obviously people are still responding to a lot of different situations and people are still primarily working from home. So we decided to move the annual general meeting to later in the year. I'm thinking at the moment we're looking at May. The thinking behind that is basically because obviously there's a huge amount of corporate priorities that need to be fulfilled between now and April. Obviously lots of turnover going on then. So we'd like as many people as possible to be able to attend. And with that meeting, we'd basically just like to bring the structure of GLAM back out into the open in front of all the members, talk about the work streams again, obviously holding elections for steering group positions, and a few new things we'd like to do is look at subject-specific champions. We've obviously tried to get those champions in place in the past, but for various reasons it hasn't been easy to keep that going. So we'd like champions like by visibility and other specific categories. We'd also like to continue with, we'd also like to look at establishing some service area specific champions so we can represent the GLAM network amongst our harder to reach teams, particularly frontline staff. That's something I've had conversations with from a few colleagues that have said that they are aware of the GLAM network, but they don't know anyone in their area who's part of it. So we'd like to change that paradigm around a bit. And we'd also like to discuss possible ways for maintaining that membership database. I, for one, would like that to be part of one of the steering group positions as a responsibility. We'd like to make sure the network's better represented in hard to reach areas, as I say, and we'd like to continue the great work we're doing at the moment with looking at policy with HR and other functions, and also the importance of the submissions from Stonewall. I think they are really, really important to get that message across that the Vale has been part of that process all the way through, that we've been helping it, and that the Vale has improved significantly. We'd also like to work harder with local businesses in the area to promote the Vale as a safe and enjoyable space for LGBTQ plus people and people of any minority. And I think there's a lot of work we can look into there, which we did start talking about a couple of years ago, but for a number of reasons that, as I've said, didn't kick off as we'd like. So that's what we'd like to achieve through our kind of soft relaunch and start discussing at our AGM later this year. Next slide, please. So we have still been working very hard behind the scenes. I'd like to personally, although he's not here, I'd like to thank Matt for the work that he's been doing with Martine and the Diverse Network. It's a wonderful thing to be part of, and it's just great to be able to support colleagues to establish other networks like ours, and we'd like to see that continue across the council for a number of different interests. We've supported management training sessions on diversity inclusion, which I think have gone down really well, and there's been quite wide access to those. We're continuing to promote the tools that Stonewall and other organisations send us, and in particular, therefore, I'd like to thank my colleagues Nicola Hinton and Hannah Rapper from the wider comms team as well, because they're the conduit that makes sure we have access to all that information, and they're absolutely vital to making sure we can keep getting these messages across, and they're very good at putting them out. And they're constantly working to find better and more intuitive ways to make sure all this information is in front of our colleagues and the wider Vale, which I think is fantastic, and I'm very grateful for their help. Some of the initiatives they have been involved with, which I'd like to draw to attention, is really we've had the option of including our pronouns and email signatures, which has been really important, and has also led to interest in other campaigns such as the recent making sure that people are able to express their names properly, which has been another kind of great conversation that's taken place after these things. And also we've been able to redesign and relaunch our logo to make sure that we're as inclusive as possible, and obviously they're heavily involved in that, so that's been brilliant. And similarly, as I've mentioned before, they're heavily involved with the submissions from Stonewall, and we've been able to, each time we've been involved in that submission process, we've been able to dig into a lot more detail and try and turn over a lot more stones in terms of making sure we've got as much as we can to contribute to that process. So I'd just like to thank my colleagues for that. Next slide, please. And that's it from me for today, but thanks very much for inviting this update, and we look forward to being able to provide some updates as we progress through our calendar of the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It was a very good presentation. Does your colleague want to have a word, say anything?
Hello, Chair. We've got a separate presentation, so I'd rather invite questions for Tom first before we go on to our presentation. Okay.
Does any members want to ask any questions or comments to Tom? I can't. My screen's gone blank. I can't see anybody.
It doesn't appear to be any hands up, Chair.
Right.
Those indicate they wanted to speak.
Right. Is that okay? Nobody wants. Oh, Ian Johnson.
Oh, yeah, Councillor
Johnson.
Just very quickly, just to thank Tom and the team for their work. I mean, I think it was quite telling that I saw as we're in the middle of LGBT plus month, if I remember correctly, and I think it's very good to see some of the photos of Barry Pride and of the staff being used by by other organisations, just adding to the visibility. So hopefully, I mean, that's event in 2019 feels a very, very long time ago now, and hopefully we'll be able to have large public events again in the future.
Thank you. We will have more information coming out through this month as well, especially off the back of this update. And just to reassure everyone that if they do want to contact us for any reason offline, you're more than welcome. And thanks for listening.
Thank you. Right, we got another presentation now, have we?
Yes. Hello, Councillor.
Hello.
Are you ready for me to make a start, Chair? Well,
yes.
Councillor. Okay, right then. I'm Martine Coles and I am Chair of the Diverse Network. And if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen, and one of my vice chairs, Laura, will be doing a tag team in chair. So I'll share my screen, and Laura, shout if I miss anything out, and then we'll swap over halfway through. Is that okay, Chair?
That's fine, yes.
Okay, well, as I've said, we are the Diverse Network. We had a rebrand of the name, so we are called Diverse now. And what I wanted to do was just provide a little update on where we're up to now, because we actually started as a network in the pandemic in January 2021. So if there was a time to start a brand new network to support colleagues during a pandemic, was an interesting time to start, but we've made a start and we've made some really good progress. Now, as a network, this is what we aim to do. And I'm on the next slide, I'm going to go into a bit more detail about what that looks like. So in terms of the first thing we did was we had a motto, we had a mission, and our mission is to be heard, create change and make a difference, because there are many employees from ethnic minority backgrounds and many allies, and we wanted to make sure there was a really good motto that represented us, and being heard and change and really making a difference is what we wanted running through all of our work of the network. And what I wanted to say was that for the first aim, the positive impact, we wanted to make sure we worked with colleagues across the council to make sure that that impact was real and it was visible. So one of the things we're able to do was offer members some training, and that training was the same training that was delivered to some elected members and to directors and heads of service. And that was more than just diversity training. It was about race awareness training and anti-racism training. So for us, one of those aims, we've made a really good start, and we've got more work to go. But that was the first step we wanted to take. So I'm really pleased that the network was able to take that step. And the next step about raising the awareness and visibility, that's about making sure that the profile of allies and employees of Ethnic Minority Network is a real thing and not something that's tokenistic. So we've been working in order to increase our membership and make sure that people are comfortable to come and have that safe space. But the awareness is something we've done, like Tom said, with his group. We've done a refresh, but we are making sure that the right people are part of the group and for the right reasons, but also a safe space, because it is hard. And then it goes on to our last aim about that social supportive network, because we wanted a place for staff from ethnic minorities to have a really, really safe space, to have some really difficult conversations, because sometimes it is hard to have those difficult conversations, and providing that supportive place is something the network aims to do. So what is the point of the network? The point of the network is to make sure that all staff, regardless of their background, can be represented, and make sure that we have an active offer of representation from minority ethnic groups. And we wanted to make sure that, for our second purpose, was to improve access. We wanted to make sure that we were an employee of choice, and people in the community would think this is a place where we want to work, we want to be part of the council. And the network, that's our long-term aim. We want to make sure that one of our purposes is fulfilled, and that we do make sure we are obviously an employee of choice for people of different ethnic minorities. And we wanted to work with the council for our third purpose about creating a better understanding of race equality issues, because I've spoken about the training we've started, and there's lots of different training providers on race equality, but we want to make sure that it's appropriate and differentiated. And the last purpose that we would like to look at as a group is making sure that when we promote the Vale of Glamorgan as a council, as an employer of choice, and when we're looking at access, we can think about mentoring, coaching, but we need to make sure that it's real and accessible for all of our employees and the community. So there is some overlapping of some of our purposes and some of our aims, but because they do blend, they are aligned, And one of the words that I'm often hear is intersectionality, because there is a crossover. And in order to be an employee of choice, we need to make sure that our allies and our staff have the training to feel comfortable in their places of work. Laura, I'm going to hand over to you onto my next slide.
Hello everyone, good evening. My name is Laura Eddins and I work as a Policy and Quality Assurance Officer for Social Services, but I've been a member of this network since it started, primarily because I'm interested in engagement and using my experience and knowledge of engagement to improve access. And also to support the network to help sort of, with more collaborative working as well. And I hope I've done that. So talking about the benefits of joining the network, well, these are many and varied, I have to say. But firstly, to open that conversation about race equality, which can be a challenging element in an organisation in a positive and constructive way, which can lead to real change. And I think a lot of it from this point of view is about fear, about challenging those fears and reassuring people about, how these conversations can take place in a safe space. So this opens channels of engagement which will remain in place to support other initiatives as well, because as Martine will say, that working with this network, it's opened sort of pathways into other initiatives as well, which, for example, GLAM, and for example, some of the wellbeing work we've been doing across the council as well. So yeah, similar experience with wellbeing, and also that set the scene for widening participation across the authority as well. And it's given us a little bit more of a conversational culture, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's kind of opened the door for that to happen. So the next point, kickstart and maintain the momentum of the race equality agenda. Also, I mean, that this work is aligned with the race equality agenda, and regular meetings and open dialogue within the network helps to support this and keep abreast of any issues. So it's also about an understanding of the organisational context, the legal context, and sort of making that accessible, that information accessible to partners and members of the network. Also developing and maintaining collaborative working across the council, and obviously this has become even more of an issue since, well, not an issue, but a priority since the pandemic, because people have felt isolated, working in silos, and sort of working collaboratively will really help overcome those obstacles. So doing that in this agenda helps the network to kind of, work with other groups that have similar aims and objectives across the council. I mean, many areas are already working collaboratively. However, the work of the network has helped this. It'll continue to support this way of working. And we've already built new communication networks and worked with existing ones to help maintain that collaboration and that all-important mutual support. So attracting and retaining talent. So we aim to attract and retaining talent through visible and real commitment to race equality and inclusion. And that sounds like a rhetoric, but we want to make that into a reality, and the benefits of joining the network will help us to do that. We're aiming to promote the authority as an employer of choice through its commitment to inclusion, and being part of the network would enable people to develop and maintain strategies we need to guide us towards this goal. And it's only going to be through such valuable input and listening to others' experiences and learning that the network will be able to do this and demonstrate this commitment. Next slide, please. Okay, the story so far. So the network, as Martine explained, was successfully established during the pandemic. So there's been a number of successful meetings and training sessions so far, despite not being able to work face to face. And the fact, I think, that the group has developed and grown despite the pandemic speaks volumes about the commitment of the members so far and the structure of that group, and also the potential there is to engage people and keep that momentum going. So in the Safe Space meeting, so Diverse recently participated in the Safe Space meeting as part of Race Equality Week a couple of weeks ago, and we all met with the Chief Executive and directors, and an open and honest discussion took place. So members of the group had various tasks and specific areas to take forward. So when we met in the safe space arena, we were able to kind of have an open and honest discussion. Also, it was really engaging and supportive environment I found as a member, and I found it was very, very productive as well. Everybody who took part genuinely, asked genuine questions and genuinely felt that they'd taken something valuable away. And I hope, an increased knowledge as well in learning. The dialogue and discussion that was created in a supportive environment was also, something that was quite new to us. As I suppose we haven't really been able to sort of discuss things in that arena before. So I think people were quite apprehensive, but there was no need to be at all. It was a really, really good experience, and something that I hope is taken forward as well. So as it says on the slide, the agreed actions were mandatory race awareness and conscious bias training, because obviously this would help in informing our workforce, and also going back to that point about promoting a positive culture in general across the authority is really important, and as well as attracting people to come and work with us. And then the other action to improve the visibility of ethnic minority colleagues and a greater sense of inclusion. So safe space, it provides a structured approach, and as part of that, the agreed actions will certainly be taken forward and help inform our workforce and promote inclusion. Okay, next slide. I think that's the last one. Okay, so who can be involved? Well, that's easy to answer because everybody can be involved. For any further information, we've got a general inbox, diverse@vailoglamorgan.gov.uk, and then obviously we've got Martine and my contact details, and also Nicole Dudridge, who I share my vice chairmanship with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Does any member want to ask Martine or a colleague any questions? Ruba.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. Hello. So thank you, but thank all three of you really for both the three presentations, because it is, from my own experience, it is really hard to to engage people in networks such as these, to give people confidence to be able to talk in safe spaces, and to feel that that it's a worthwhile project. And I have to say, you guys have done a tremendous job already, and I know from Martine's emails that it's not always an easy an easy process. So I really want to say really fantastic work, and to Clam as well. I should have said that earlier, because I think you are making progress, and it's a really valuable project that we're embarking on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Comment really, Chair.
Pardon?
I said it was a comment rather than a question. Sorry.
All right. Councillor Johnson. Right.
Thank you very much both for the presentation. It's very, very interesting. A couple of quick questions, just sort of to inform myself a little better. First of all, I'm assuming that it's already arranged that both GLAM and Diverse will be part of the introduction and training cycle for new councillors after the elections. So I think it'd be, if not, I think it would be very helpful for people to hear about the various networks going on in the council and understand what's going on. I've got a couple of queries. I think firstly it's the how the Diverse Network fits in against the Wales Race Equality Action Plan, and the way that voluntary organisations within the council fit in against sort of the corporate targets and goals, and how those balance against each other. I don't know if you're the best people to do that, or if that's something that maybe should refer to Tom, because we've got obviously council development plans later on. But I'm interested to hear, sort of, because there are obviously tensions between sort of more voluntary style work and corporate targets. And my final point is, there was a few comments there about about representation. I'm just wondering in terms of the population of the Vale Glamorgan, to what extent the council workforce represents that in terms of race, people as an underrepresentation, overrepresentation of different ethnic groups. I don't know if those figures are available or not, but just interested in how you how you perceive that in terms of the workforce and its diversity. Thank you.
Chair, would you like me to answer those? Or
yes, if you'd like to answer, yes.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for your questions and comments. They're much appreciated. And in terms of induction, when we had the Safe Space meeting, the directors brought that up as well. They said it'd be quite good as part of induction for employees. But what we talked about was making sure we raise awareness with existing employees as well. So I think it's really good that we can make sure that we can be part of those discussions about induction. But what we talked about was having ongoing dialogue with existing members of staff. And I'm going to go to your third point and then come back to your second one, because in terms of representation, and one of the things we've spoken about in the past is the retention of staff from ethnic minority backgrounds. In order to retain the staff from ethnic minority backgrounds, they need allies and they need to feel they belong. So we've done lots of conversations about how we make sure there is that belonging, because when we first started, we had the figures of ethnic minority employees, and yes, the numbers were low, but also we said that when people apply, how comfortable are they at putting their ethnic background? Because sometimes, depending on what job you're applying for and depending on your confidence, and sometimes people just don't feel as comfortable to say they are from a background. So in terms of recording and the numbers, they are low anyway, but they are lower because of people not feeling as comfortable as they could. And that's why I think if we can do some work on induction and with existing staff, people talk to each other. And if we can make sure that we've got that positive dialogue about the Vale is a really actively inclusive place to work, then people from various protected characteristics are going to feel they belong and then apply and then stay. And then we smooth transition onto the Race Equality Action Plan. This group, we talked about the Race Equality Action Plan when Welsh Government started the consultation. It was very exciting and very ambitious, the Race Equality Action Plan. So where do we fit in with that? We fit in, well, we fit in a place where that we can revisit the Race Equality Action Plan and find out what it means for us as employees in our various roles. So there isn't such a case of this group is part of the council's Race Equality Action Plan, because that's not our role at the moment. Our role is that safe first space. And what's good is that the dialogue around the Race Equality Action Plan about Wales being actively anti-racist, it gives that conversation for it to come from a very democratic place, so from employees to managers, rather than this is the Welsh Government stance and this is what we need to do. I feel that this group is able to have that two-way dialogue with the Race Equality Action Plan, because it should be something that we are part of that dialogue as employees from ethnic minorities and allies as well. So Councillor Johnson, I think I've answered them, but I'm not sure I've answered them in the order that was helpful.
That's fine. I've just got one comment. Do you have any links with similar groups across other councils?
I would say at the moment we don't. And at the moment we are very mindful, and especially a year into this journey, is that we make the group as Vale centric as possible.
Right, yeah.
Because one of the things that when I did some training about other networks in other areas, and for different organisations, especially in the private sector, there are different agendas. And what the steering group and I feel very passionate about, we need to make sure this group stays very Vale focused, because it is different. It isn't one of the most diverse areas in Wales, but we still need to make sure that it's a place for allies to stand up and be counted, to make sure those employees from ethnic minority backgrounds feel they belong. So no, and we started a little bit, but we need to make sure we find our feet first, Chair. Then I feel we'll be in a better position to spread the word and link in with other organisations. But it was interesting going to JCF on Monday and talking to our colleagues in the different unions about how they can support us to make sure that, for example, agency staff and those staff that work either in parks or that aren't desk-based still have access to the network, because that's one of the things we feel quite strongly about. Those staff that don't have access to StaffNet readily, they are still active members and they are still welcome. So we've got that piece of work that we're really keen to explore, how we can reach those members of our community and our workforce that aren't what I would call the traditional ones that would join up to these networks they see on StaffNet.
About that, my phone went off then. I just had to put myself on mute. I can say our chair has joined us, but I don't. I wanted to bring in Councillor Liz Burnett because she's had her hand up.
Actually, Chair, as I'm not a member of the committee, I'm quite happy to wait until everyone else has spoken, if you'd like.
Has anybody else got any other points they want to raise? I can't see any hands up.
I think just Councillor Wilson, that's all, Chair.
Councillor Wilson himself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pam. I apologise for being late, and we have problems with traffic, and then I have problems with connections. But can I thank you very much for your presentation? I did see some of that, and I really appreciate the work that you're all doing on this, because I think it's really important for the council to be spearheading such initiatives. And can I thank you all very much? And I look forward to seeing the presentation at another time.
Yes.
Over to you, Pam.
It was very good. Yes. So I got Liz, cabinet member, would like to come in, and then I got Tracy Dickinson would like to make some comments. So I don't know whether you want to take your position first, Liz.
I might as well. Thank you, Vice Chair. And huge thank you to Martine, Laura and Tom as well. They really enjoyable presentations and very important. And I echo what Councillor Johnson said about this being a fundamental part of the training of new members following the election. But I think I might even go a little bit further than that. Just before Matt left, actually, he came and did a presentation to the senior leadership team. And it was a bit more than just awareness raising. It was a bit of a challenge to action as well. I found that really powerful and thought-provoking. And so I actually would say that it's, if that is adopted, and I would hope, that Scrutiny would support that actually it takes that approach, a much more proactive approach to tell new elected or existing members as well, if they're coming back, exactly what we should be doing to take this agenda forward. I think we've actually moved quite a way in recent years, and it's actually quite nice, to see the rainbow flag flying over the civic office this month, but also to have, well, what I call the disco tunnel, the Hood Road tunnel lit up in rainbow colours for this month. The tunnel's lit up, and we actually can do that for any specific date that is important in those calendars. It's not only a demonstration to our staff, but it's a demonstration to the public. So if we're looking to say to people, we are not only a welcoming county, we are a welcoming council. That makes a very visible point. We are active members of Fast Track Cardiff and the Vale, so much so that they changed their logo to include us specifically. I also spoke at, I've been a volunteer for a number of years, but I spoke at LGBT History Month specifically about our first LGBT leader and mayor, Councillor Margaret Alexander, and that was good as well. I know Marty's been working very hard, not only here, but working in the inclusion agenda, working with our schools to promote such an approach as well. And we've got some brilliant news shortly on that, but I won't spill the beans. But when the Diverse Network were looking at the Race Equality Action Plan, there was a really powerful comment that I think is worth repeating. I think our networks are very, very powerful, and they are networks that can help us to make our policy stronger and more inclusive. But there was a plea: do not expect individuals in those networks to come up with solutions on behalf of the organisation. That the solution to some of the issues that we and they face, because it's a collective responsibility, should be discussed and developed together. And it's not you should do this, you should do that, whatever. It should be in us, and I suppose that's my plea. That was such a powerful comment on that plan that it stayed with me, and I hope that we can take that forward. So thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you once again, you three.
Right, thank you, Liz. I would like to bring in Tracy now, Tracy Dickinson. She's had her hand up for a while.
Thank you, Councillor Drake, and thank you for the opportunity just to speak. I probably can't answer any more eloquently than Martine did in relation to some of the questions that Councillor Johnson raised, but I just thought it was worth just highlighting that we are underrepresented in our groups across the board. But as Martine rightly says, the data there is not accurate either. So we're actively working on how we can improve our data sets. And Tom, Martine and Laura and the team have been absolutely incredible in helping us support the development of policy and statistical information so that we do work together on it. So I just wanted to highlight that to Councillor Johnson because he asked that direct question, and I wanted him to know that that's the answer, but the wider answer is quite rightly as Martine has put it. So one of the things we're working really closely with all of the groups on currently is actually on our attraction strategy and how we look at both attracting, selecting and appointing into the local authority across all of our groups. I also thought it might be an opportunity just to tell this group that we're also looking at a network for disability colleagues as well. And we have started the ball rolling. We've got a very small group who've come to us to say they would like to look at setting up that group. Their next meeting on the 15th of March, and our communications team with Tom is involved in putting out the message to groups to invite volunteers who might want to become involved in that group as well. And that's a really welcome addition for us and something that we really look forward to working collaboratively together on moving forward. So I just thought it was the opportunity to let you know of that as well. Thank you.
Oh, it's been a really excellent presentation from all of you, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So it's onward and upward, but I think Martine wants to come back in.
I wanted just to come back with more of a thank you in terms of what was said about the us, because what has been really clear since this was from the very beginning is the support and the appropriate support from colleagues in HR and equalities. And I didn't want the diverse network to be us as a small group educating the wider council. And I felt very much a case of this is an us together, working with corporate equalities, working with HR, working with directors, and even some of the regular members, our elected members, and it definitely feels, Chair, as an us. I know we are a very small group and it's at the beginning, but I would say that feeling of us is definitely there, and I feel really comfortable as a Vale employee with the Race Equality Action Plan. I think as an authority we're in a really strong position, and we're not paying lip service to the Race Equality Action Plan, which is what I was concerned about because we kind of started at the same time. I wanted this to be a meaningful engagement with the Race Equality Action Plan, and not just a group to say this is what the Vale are doing, take that off and move on. So I would like to say to the group that I feel really comfortable that the Race Equality Action Plan and the direction travelling the Vale is a genuinely positive step forward.
Yeah, thank you. I think Tom wants to come back in.
Sorry, just briefly, I wanted to echo what Martine was just saying, and also to say what I have noticed is that, and this has been mentioned particularly by Tracy as well, that the information we want to be able to use in terms of our demographic and our comparison between our staff groups and the Vale as a whole, it's not there as we'd like it to be, so it's not as useful as it can be, but the enthusiasm has been really out there to try and get hold of that information and use it positively. And I'd just like to thank Tracy and her teams and everyone else who's involved in trying to make sure we can actually get to a stage where we have that information, we can make those comparisons, and then we can make positive decisions for the future, because as Martine said, it does really feel like a team effort, a collaboration, and it's really positive. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, hopefully in the future we'll have another presentation when you move on, an increase, and get the disability one on board as well, because that's very important. Okay, I don't know whether anybody else wants to say anything. I think we've covered a lot, and thank you very much for your attendance. You can stay with us if you wish, or you can leave. I can hand over now to the chair to take on to the next item.
Thank you very much, Pam, and thank you for chairing that. I really appreciate that. Okay, we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the draft public participation strategy. Tom?
Yeah, good evening, Chair. Good evening, committee. How to follow those two presentations, that sets the bar really high for this evening. With your permission, Chair, I'm joined this evening by my colleague Howis. Howis works in our communications and engagement team, and we'll take you through this reference by means of a slideshow if we can do. So if you're happy, we'll put those slides up, and Howis, can you do that for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great stuff. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of the background, and then Howis will talk you through the draft of the public participation strategy. So as you said, Chair, this is a reference from the Council's Cabinet, and we are bringing it to your committee this evening as part of the consultation process that is running on the public participation strategy. So the next slide sets out just what has been driving the development of this particular strategy. So if you could move it on, please, Howis.
Yeah.
The first thing to flag is that this is a requirement under the Local Government and Elections Act. We need to publish this strategy by the May elections this year. But I think that that's just the legislative driver for this particular piece of work. I think this is an opportunity actually for us to wrap up an ambition that we've had for a number of years and set some real targets for taking that work forward. There are a number of commitments within the Council's corporate plan. So looking at how we improve the way that we can facilitate people to participate in the decision-making process and to understand and get involved in the work of the council. We've had significant feedback from residents on social media as part of previous consultations, which again, we've looked at how we can incorporate those aspects into this strategy. And what we want is to enhance the relationship that we have with our residents and their impression of us as an organisation. So I'll hand you over to Howis now. Howis will talk us through some of the highlights of the strategy, and then I'll just wrap up in terms of where we are in the process. So over to you, Howis.
Brill, thank you. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Howis Davis. I am the Public Engagement and Communications Officer. You probably know my predecessor, Hannah Rapper. I'm covering for her while she's on maternity. And as Tom said, we've been working together to launch the PPS. So we really see this as, more than anything, a bit of an opportunity to kind of bring the way we engage and the way that we communicate with residents and stakeholders into the, well, not into the 21st century, but certainly to modernise it and kind of bring it in line with the digital advancements that we've seen over the last 2 years. So the strategy basically seeks to provide our stakeholders, so our residents, as many of them as possible, the opportunity to participate and to get involved in the decision-making process. So enabling them to meaningfully shape what we do and how we do it. In practice, this means informing residents of their role, so being a bit more transparent about how decisions are made, how they can get involved, and to what extent their involvement is going to influence the outcomes. We want to better engage, so encourage residents and make it easier for them to participate in the decision-making process. So some of the feedback that we do have on social media is that it's not always accessible or not always easy for people to get involved. We're perhaps not always exploring as many avenues as we could be with regards to the engagement process. And finally then, to improve the way that we feed back to the people who have taken the time to engage with us, to give us their views, not only as a thank you, but also so that they understand what the outcome of their participation has been, and that in turn is going to keep them engaged with us and ensure that they keep kind of sharing their views and helping shape the decisions that we make. So this has been a bit of a labour of love, as I'm sure you can imagine. Before we started the PPS, we did some extensive best practice research to inform the strategy. So looking at what other organisations had been doing, both public and private sector. This gave us a bit of a feel of kind of what the standard was and what things we might want to include in the PPS. We've done some community level public engagement exercises, and we've also increased the use of our digital engagement tools. I guess the best way of explaining this is we've thought a little bit outside the box in terms of how we've engaged recently. So we've switched from the kind of more traditional way of engaging face-to-face and putting a consultation up online to things like Zoom meetings, things like webinars, using polls on Twitter, so we can get a bit more of a broader spectrum of responses and in theory reach more people. So the actions that we've detailed in the strategy have ultimately been informed by the council's values. I don't know whether I need to read those, I'm sure you know them off by heart. But we wanted to make sure essentially that our values were at the heart of the strategy, and thankfully the actions actually tied in quite nicely with these. So I guess the main ones to touch on would be to further develop our online community as a means to engage and promote our consultation work and also feedback on it. Community for us is quite important, it's quite an important aspect of our work. As I touched on earlier, really making sure that we kind of nurture the relationship that we have with residents and with stakeholders, both face-to-face and online, making sure that we are present and that we are responsive and that people feel that they can come to us to voice their issues or raise any issues that they've got. We wanted to promote a greater understanding of the role of Cabinet and scrutiny committees. So I know that our colleagues are in the process of setting up the e-petitions process. So this will allow more people to kind of bring their issues to Cabinet and to scrutiny, and also raise a bit more of an understanding of actually what the issues that the council deal with. We wanted to adopt a no voice left behind approach. So I touched on this briefly in terms of our online community, so the work that we've done with regards to, I guess, extending the way that we engage people. But more so than just leaning into the digital aspect of that, we want to make sure that we're coming down to people on their level. So we're meeting them within their communities, within settings that they feel are a safe space and that they can share their views openly and honestly. It has been a little bit tricky with the coronavirus pandemic. Obviously, we've not been able to do as much engagement as we would have liked, but certainly as restrictions start to lift, it's something that we want to look at restarting again, and hopefully restarting at a higher calibre than we were doing previously. And finally, we wanted to develop a methodology with the way that we feed back on the outcome of engagement. So one of the main feedbacks that we have from people, both on our social media channels and also in our consultations, is that people are giving their views, they're taking the time to fill out our consultations, and either we're taking decisions that perhaps they don't necessarily agree with, and not explaining how we've reached that decision. We're not explaining what the outcome of their participation is as well, so how their views have gone on to influence our decision making. So we really want to kind of tighten up, come up with a bit of a methodology, something that we can do by the book to make sure that not only are we taking the time to thank people for getting involved and sharing their views, but also making sure that they then understand what the outcomes are, how those outcomes have been reached. The way that we're going to do that is primarily through our social media channels, so coming up with things like graphics, posts, etc., and also making use of the Gov Delivery service. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with that, but essentially that's our mailing list. We've already got a consultation mailing list that we do send consultations out to, so it'd be really great to harness that and use it as a way not only to ask people to fill things out, but also then to share the outcomes of those consultations. So the next step for the PPS, the end of the consultation will be on the 8th of March. We've got a few more social media posts being shared between then and now. One of my colleagues, who is rather brilliant at creating animations and videos, has kindly got a few of those underway that we will be sharing at a later date to, again, get more people involved with the PPS. It'll then be going to Cabinet on the 14th of March, and hopefully we'll be launching and implementing our new strategy on the 9th of May. So I don't know whether, Tom, you want to take over from here or whether I carry on and pose the questions. I'm happy either way.
You're doing a fantastic job, Harris. So
Okay.
Feel free to carry on in terms of the key questions that we're asking as part of the consultation.
Brilliant. So, yeah, as Tom just touched on, these are the key questions that we're asking. Will these actions help us engage more people in the decision-making process? Will our actions better connect people, better connect the people who use our services with the council, with the people who are providing the services? And will these actions give the council greater insight to better plan our service delivery?
Okay, thank you very much for that. Do you want to say anything, Tom, or do you want to wait till you get answers from members?
Yeah, happy, Chair, to take any questions from committee members.
Yes, please. If we can get any questions from committee members, that would be good. George, do you want to say something, Councillor Carroll?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's 2 points, really. The first one might be something that Harris can answer, and the second one is probably more for whoever is running the administration, really. But the first one, which is something for not so much Harris personally, but whoever is responsible for organising consultations. And it's really, there have been issues in the past, I think Llancarvan School being a good one, where a lot of people who consider themselves to be affected by decisions or potential decisions that are out for consultation don't end up receiving notification of it. And I think that happened with Llancarvan, and then the process sort of had to be reopened to allow people to participate. Now, I think I appreciate that's something that happened several years ago now, so it's not really, procedures may have improved since then. I just wanted to flag it really and say it's important that when we do have consultations that are held, people are made aware of them, they know how they can respond to them, and basically to ensure that we have the safeguards in place that people can engage with the process, because there are often cases where people do genuinely want to participate and make their views known, but if they're not afforded that opportunity because they don't know, then obviously they won't. And the second one, it's a more general point. I appreciate that often when we hold consultations, you can't please everybody, and if you're taking a decision and it's an issue that might be divisive, or there are 2 strands of opinion, somebody is going to be disappointed. But often there is perhaps a perception that consultations are held, and this isn't a political point, I mean it happens both in this council and more generally, it happens no matter who is running the administration, that consultations are held and then the situation, the decision is sort of a fait accompli before it's taken, and the consultation is just seen as sort of a face-saving exercise. Now, I'm not going to reference any particular decisions here. I just think that it's important that people feel that when they take part in a consultation, their views are going to be taken into account, and it's not just part of the procedure that needs to be done. And I think it's important we get that message across, because we want to increase engagement on this, not put people off. So I just wanted to raise that, really, and thank you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you, George. Ruba, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, one of the issues around sort of engagement and inclusion, which I'd say is an important element of engagement, I think is a sort of a lack of, not a lack of civic education, but the fact, you know, in schools I think we don't do enough to encourage, you know, young people to participate, you know, whether it's in, you know, local politics, but, you know, generally in their communities. And I think we're beginning to see that gap, I think, as people feel more and more disengaged. So if that's part of a background, you know, this as a strategy, you know, it's good, because I can see that you're you know, as a council, we're trying to hit all the points of trying to communicate with people and engaging with people and including in people in the Vale of Glamorgan. But I suppose and Tom, you will know this, because I think we've had a series of conversations about this. I think what's always lacking is the fact that we don't have the resources to actually implement sort of, you know, going out into communities and really engaging with them. That means going, I suppose, going beyond social media. That means actually probably meeting people face to face in communities that wouldn't usually be interested in the council. So I think that's really important. And I wonder, as a committee, you know, how we sort of prioritise engagement, you know, with the Vale of Glamorgan. You know, I don't know whether this becomes a cost pressure, you know, in the budget, for example, so that, you know, that we're always mindful of the fact this is a really key part of, you know, of what we do as a council. So, you know, the presentations was great, and I wholeheartedly support all the things that you're doing, but I do think in some ways we're tied in terms of the extent to which we can go, because I think, you know, we don't have the resources. And Tom, you know, we discussed this when I in part of, as equalities champion, part of my response to you know, the race equality plan with Welsh Government was the fact that there isn't a pot of money, you know, for engagement, and that's really, in my view, it's a critical point. And really, to touch on just something that Councillor Carroll raised, I think it's a really cynical view to take that somehow, you know, a decision's made before you know, a consultation goes out. You know, the fact that we don't have, you know, a great response sometimes, you know, is not for want of trying, but I think we need to go further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Before I bring Liz and Neil, I think Ian wants to speak as well. Ian, do you want to come in? You're muted, Ian.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Hawys, am y cyflwyniad. Thank you very much there, Chair. It was very interesting listening to the presentation, also listening to the comments from both Councillor Carroll and Councillor Sivinianum. This is I think, a perennial issue that comes before our committee about what does good engagement with the public look like, and we've had this discussion here on many occasions about stakeholder participation, about people coming and speaking to committee about the way in which the council deals with the public. And I think in some respects, and I appreciate that this is a consultation that's come out of you know, Welsh Government legislation and requirements to do this, but I feel that almost, for me, the flip is needed. We need to understand, what does good engagement look like? My experience as a local councillor is that when people are upset with a decision, then you hear about it. that when people are frustrated with a council decision that's being made, then we hear about it, and those people come along to planning meetings. There are special meetings of other committees that take place. Last week we had a large number of speakers talking about issues regarding nursery provision in Penarth. That's also had large-scale petitions and things like that. People, when they're upset and when they are frustrated with the council decision, they will come along and make their voice heard. So in some respects, you know when you've got it wrong, or when you've got something that's got a great deal of particular public ire. The question, I think, is how we use engagement in order to better inform our policy positions, in order to better decide, sort of what the public feel about something. And sometimes we get that right, and sometimes we don't. I'm thinking of some of the Twitter polls that are engaged in one of the later items about the draft annual plan, where there's 50 or 100 participants to those. Have we got the wording right? Sort of why are there so few people engaging in some of those things? You can't make everything go viral. You can't make everything representative of 130, 140,000 people that live in the Vale. So I think it really needs to, when you've got there's so many different areas that you have to hit with a strategy like this. How do we make sure that the general public have their say? How do we ensure that those who are harder to reach have their say? How do you ensure that everybody, we just had presentations obviously from GLAM and Diverse. How do you make sure those with protected characteristics are included with everything? I think it's very, very difficult to have an engagement strategy that includes all of those people across social media, across the real world, in different ways. So it's a great challenge. But I think that in some respect, I think I'd like to hear, not necessarily today from Howis and Tom, but what does good look like for them? Because we can fire off in every single direction, but then have we got what we want at the end of the day? What is the end product that we want people to rubber stamp or agree with policies that we're putting forward? We want people to be defining those policies or workshopping them to make sure that they get better by the end before they get presented to others. I think there's a lot of platforms, and I'm not sure that we're yet at a point where I understand what each of those are really going to achieve. So maybe just a little bit of drilling down, a little bit of thinking about what do each of these things do for the council in terms of our overall politics. It's not just about, it's that, how do you get that, both the shouting to people, the telling everybody what we want. Today is a good example, giving messages out about the storm tomorrow. How do we make sure that we're talking out to people and listening to people at the same time and ensuring those things come back? And one of the problems with the providing feedback is that inevitably people engage more when there's something quite controversial and we've, and people are not happy with what the council have done. A lot of the time that's planning issues, a lot of the time that's education issues. It's going to take very briefly to Councillor Carroll's point about consultations that feel like they're not really consultations. A lot of statutory notices, for example, take place in, say, the education field, and people, in reality, there's no way of opposing that or disagreeing with that, because the decision has effectively been taken as far as people can see. And that's difficult then, because the council has to go through a proper formal consultation process on these things. But actually, if you followed the process properly, then there shouldn't be any reason for the council to overturn the decisions. And people sometimes feel the decisions have been made to them, whether it's regressed or not. But thank you for the presentation there. Yeah.
Do you want to come in?
You're on mute, Chair.
Liz, do you want to come in?
Yes, if that's okay, Chair. Just a couple of points, really. Interesting. Councillor Carroll's point was interesting, because I think as councillors we know the difference. It's unfortunate that there's a difference between what are statutory consultations, where the consultation is undertaken to check out whether or not the application of an already agreed policy of the council is being applied correctly. And that consultation is not engagement. It's not a form of co-production. It's to double check thinking, and then, but obviously to look at any objections objectively to see whether or not there's something that should be done, should be tweaked or overturned. There are consultations that have overturned, you know, the actual consultation proposal in the past. But I would say that that's not the usual. But the other side of it is effective engagement, and I think this is partially what we're talking about here, and in terms of active participation of citizens, and that's what we really should be aiming for, isn't it? But there are examples of where it's worked well. If you look on the council's website, we've got a community mapping toolkit, and it was developed by the Creative Rural Communities team, and it is hugely powerful. And where that has been used with communities, and the two I can think of straight away, St Athan, where that mapping actually developed local services and provided play facilities and activities within the community. One particularly was that they wanted multi-generational activities provided in their community, and that now happens. And then the other one was to do with Wenvo, where some opinions in terms of how the community library should develop were actually overturned. They were changed within the community once that mapping had happened and it was reflected back. It can be so powerful, and that is exactly where we would want to be going. And you know, sadly, EU funding's gone for the Creative Rural Communities team, but hopefully we can move forward with that on a more across-fail basis. We need to be able to develop trusted conversations and trusted dialogues with residents, because at the moment, you know, one would hope that, you know, a councillor with a full term's experience would understand how consultations work and hopefully be able to explain it to residents so that they don't get upset and realise, you know, that they know how to input into these things. You know, it's a bit like with planning committee. I mean, I know, Mark, you very often have supported residents to make their voices heard within a planning committee. You know, it might not have had any effect, but at least they know at the end of it that their voice has been heard. I know other members have done similar, and that's a very important role that we play as elected members in helping people to participate in the democratic process. But as I said, we have got a history of engagement. It would just be wonderful if through this strategy that we were able to do an awful lot more.
Before I let Ian in, as I'm going to ask anyone else who hasn't yet spoken to speak, because I will say something if no one else has said anything. No, I've got no one else apart from me. So I'm going to make a few points. Neil, do you want to come in before I do?
Yeah,
Neil,
I wasn't going to, because I put my hand up and I took it down. I think what we need to emphasise here that this is a participation strategy, and there are so many different ways in which we have to participate and listen to people's concerns. But there are also issues in terms of people who talked about statutory consultations, which is something where, you know, we've got a policy, or for example, like a good one is we've always had a policy of having 3 to 11 or 3 to 19 or whatever age schools. So it's a participation rather than rather than a referendum. And I think that's something to get over. It isn't a referendum on what we intend to do. It's a case of, look, sometimes we will say, this is our policy, this is what we think is right. These are the options, but we think this is the preferred strategy. This is the preferred option. And we'll ask for people's views. And you have to take them into consideration. And people sometimes think, because they disagree with you and there's enough people to disagree with you, you're going to have to take those views. Well, that's not necessarily the case. It is a case of participation. It's a case of listening what's there. It's like, for example, we often have reports with objection reports. So when we have an objection report to, I don't know, let's say a disabled parking bay, for example, we would take on interviews of those people who object, and an officer's report will come forward, and you look for the logical reason why we're doing this as opposed to why the objections come in. The other thing is we participate with people like, for example, the residence parking schemes. We talk to people, we consulted with people, we chatted with people, we participated with them, saying what's the issues. We knew what the issues were. We said we're going to put a policy in place, for example, on an example of Redmond Crescent, let's say, right, in Barry Island. So we've done that. But what we've also done since then is participated with the residents to actually say, how can we now improve it? So, you know, this is the participation strategy is immense if you think across the views of everything that we have to do as a council. And I think it's right that we try to get to as close to and as near to as many people as possible. But we do it for different reasons, and I think people need to understand that. And I think that's the issue more than anything else, is that we need to talk to people. We need to take into consideration their views, but we also have to take a policy decision. We also have to take a decision, which may not, you know, it's the same with planning, isn't it? In planning, you can never approve something, so that if you approve something, the objectors object. If you reject it, the applications object. There's always a line you have to take. So this is the reason why I think this participation strategy has been put together, to try and make it fair and equitable. Sorry, I prattled on. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. Okay, I will say a couple of things as well. I mean, obviously, I think a participation strategy is obviously always needed, given the fact that we are members here are elected by people, and obviously, if we don't listen to them and don't take on their views, we may face political damage, and we all understand that. But we also got to remember, of course, that as councillors, we also got other responsibilities as well. And one of it is managing the budget, one is looking at other demands and other responses out there. And it is not an easy task to do. And sometimes qualitative responses are just as valid, if not more valid, than quantitative responses as well. And that's something that we also got to balance. We also got to balance is how people do communicate. I mean, one thing I'm looking increasingly is an app called Nextdoor. And that is kind of hyper-local. It's really interesting next door, and you get a real feel what the issues are in locality. And you know, and it's really interesting. And you look at things what are trending at the moment. And obviously, lots of things are trending. One thing is trending is parking, for example. You know, we know we've got issues with parking in lots of parts of the Vale of Morgan. But how do you resolve it? It's not easy to resolve. But consultation and discussion about it is one way in which we can help out. And listening to people, I think it is vital. And if you can take on all their views and act upon it, then terrific. But we also got to mind there are constraints, and I think that's important as well. But I'm also very interested in engagement with young people. And I think that is vital as well. And I think sometimes, you know, we need to do more and trying to do that. Now, I know we got the youth cabinet and we got youth ambassadors and people, and I think it's very important to listen to them. But they also got to be representative of their communities as well. And I think that is important as well. So before I bring in Tom, I think Ian wants to say something. And then if anyone else wants to say anything, especially anyone who hasn't said anything, and then I'll pass it on back to Tom Bettin. So Ian, do you want to say something now? You're muted, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, this is the problem of turning the camera on and off rather than just leaving it on and getting straight on with it. There's a couple of points very interesting there. Firstly, I do think that the Chair's point about, you know, sort of those who speak loudest and those who speak most frequently there, I think are relevant. Talking about me here, but relevant in general to how how voice is listened to. I think, you know, sort of one of the issues that the wider issues is people's understanding of the processes, people's understanding of what the council is able to do, achieve, or the restrictions under which the council operates. And so actually that's sort of the that level of ensuring of education is also quite a relevant part of this as a process. Two very quick points. One is just a process matter for us, which is obviously this is something that is a reference from Cabinet, but we've had two Cabinet members, come in and explain why, what Scrutiny should be thinking. So I'm just conscious of that and how the independence of this process works. But on a more practical level, one of the procedures being brought in by the legislation and by this procedure is the e-petitions process. I'm just wondering, sort of what that means, what that process looks like, what the management looks like, how that's going to be run through the council in future, and particularly ensuring that people know what is relevant for our level of governments and what is not. So what's the procedure for actually saying, this should be done by the Senedd? And I say that because lots of things go to the Senedd, which are a e-petitions process, which are very clearly related to local governance.
Thank you very much. Gwyn, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I was late arriving. I had a dental appointment and I couldn't cancel it, and you changed the time of the meeting, so there we are. But I'd seen the presentations and I've also seen this one earlier in the week. And what I would like to say is that I agree with what Ian's just said, and I find the biggest problem out there is public understanding the difference between the councils and what we actually do. There's a lot of people out there, you give them at this time of the year, election time, you give them loads of literature, your contact numbers and everything, and they haven't got a clue then who their county councillor is, who their town councillor is. They march down the town hall and they make all sorts of complaints, and it's nothing to do with us because it's on private land anyway. So the whole understanding is a big thing. I think we need to get this over as well as much as we can. And also, it's not just about digital participation. There's a lot of people out there, there's obviously the older age groups, a lot of them are not switched on to social media. And I think that's important that we don't exclude them, because those people are sometimes the people that need the most help and support, and they ask the questions and they have respect as well. They don't sort of criticise the council all the time because they've grown up with councils. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gwyn. And Tom, do you want to respond now?
Certainly, thank you, Chair, and thank you to committee members for those questions. If I can maybe take them in turn, but if I've missed anything, please do let me know. Where Councillor Sivignano was asking about the importance of engaging and including young people, absolutely. Was really proud of the work that colleagues in education have done to support the consultation on the annual delivery plan, and we had some really good engagement with young people. But what we also heard from those young people was it's actually quite difficult to engage on these sometimes big corporate strategies or plans that run into 40 or 50 pages, and we need to find better and more interesting ways of engaging with them. And I'm really pleased that I met for the first time this week with a collection of colleagues across the organisation as a bit of a task and finish group to start to map out actually what are some of the things that we can do with young people in a different way, using tools and techniques that are more familiar to them to help them participate and understand, and therefore to be able to influence. And a number of members have also talked about the importance of this not just being digital, and that's absolutely right. Digital is great for giving us very quick and broad reach. It's interesting that the profile of our respondents to online surveys is broadly in the 55 to 74 year age group. So actually there's a demographic there that are participating in digital means, but that's clearly not everybody in that age group, and it's not reaching all parts of the community. And I think there is a real need for us to improve, and there's an ambition and an appetite to do this. in terms of those conversations that happen at very local levels with our residents when they're accessing services or they're coming for advice, and how we build up that intelligence and insight as we go through. And I know that my colleagues in housing are finding that that's particularly happening around things like the Penarth Food Pod, where our residents are coming to access that food provision, but they're talking about other issues, and they're able to bring that information back to us, and that's able to help shape and inform what we want to do. Councillor Sivignon also asked about the capacity within the council to do this, and I think it's a point well made. I've invested within the corporate centre in some additional capacity, both within the communications and the equalities team. I know that colleagues within the regeneration service have submitted a cost pressure as part of next year's revenue budget to look to enhance the capacity within some of those teams as a legacy for creative rural communities, and there would be an importance of enhancing that work, and also not seeing this as just something that the corporate centre of the organisation does. We have a role in helping to shape things like the public participation strategy, but actually the benefit of having this strategy is about bringing together all of this information and insight from all of those roles across the organisation who are having these kind of interactions. And then Councillor Johnson posed the question around what does good look like, and I think that's the real challenge that we need to now take forward. I think the strategy sets out the ambition for what we want to see. In terms of judging how we're doing, there's an opportunity as part of the annual self-assessment report, which will be brought to members in October, and there's a specific commitment within the public participation strategy to monitor its effectiveness and to enable members to scrutinise as part of that particular process. And I think there's something in that is about this not just being we'll launch a formal consultation on a particular document. We need to be doing that early involvement and engagement piece throughout the year, and that's the work that I'm looking to do with the young people, but I think actually it's transferable into all age groups. It's about breaking things down, it's about having more frequent conversations with people, whether that's by going out into communities or whether that's inviting communities to come to us, in order that we build up that cumulative picture of particular issues. And we've seen that when people get interested and they've got a passion about something, so for example the Project Zero consultation, where we had a decent response, the Penarth Peer Pavilion consultation that had over 1,000 responses, but that doesn't just apply to those particular issues. We can use that to inform our decision making more generally as well, I think. So and then finally, I think Councillor Johnson asked about the e-petitions process. I know Cabinet received a report recently about the introduction of e-petitions, and we're currently now finalising the software provider that will enable that to work. So further information will be forthcoming as that starts to become implemented.
Apologies, I got no speakers to speak on this. Can I thank you all? And obviously we look forward to the action plan coming in due course as well. Can I thank you all? Are we now moving on to the next item on the agenda?
Sorry, Chair, I just want to check in terms of the recommendation. Is there anything that we're sending back or just to endorse?
I think we note him.
Okay, yeah. Just to double check. Thank you very much, Chair.
You. All right, moving on now to the I think, are we going to be going on to the Welsh language promotion strategy next? Because I thought we'd do pay policy at the end. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm joined this evening by Di Thomas. You'll remember that that David is the consultant that has been working with us over the last few months in the development of the Welsh language promotion strategy. You'll be relieved to know that Di is going to do the majority of the talking during this item as well, not just me. The point of the process that we're at currently is that committee will recall we brought the initial draft of this strategy to your committee prior to Christmas during the consultation process. The consultation is now closed and we've reflected on the findings of the consultation in order to present a draft of the strategy alongside an action plan for its delivery. We took the same bundle of reports that you have on your agenda this evening, Chair, to the Learning and Culture Committee last week, who noted those reports, and we're now bringing it to you in order to give Corporate Performance and Resources members the opportunity to scrutinise prior to then taking this to Cabinet for their consideration and endorsement so that it's in place for the next financial year. There's a series of papers that are attached to the report this evening. Appendix A is the consultation report, and that sets out the findings of the engagement process that we ran around the draft strategy. We had 136 respondents to that particular piece of consultation, alongside a focus group with Forum Iaith, who provided a kind of workshop-based set of feedback for us. The feedback was fairly mixed in summary. About half of respondents questioned the need for a strategy at all, and this is a statutory requirement, so we have a duty to publish this strategy. And of the remaining respondents, we had a series of comments that were around things such as that the Welsh language should be given the opportunity to thrive and treated with equal respect to English, that there should be further opportunity for adults and children to access Welsh language provision and training, and more opportunity to use it socially as a language outside of the classroom. So we've taken the themes of the consultation responses, including the discussions at your committee in Learning and Culture previously, Chair, and updated the assessment, which is a requirement under the Welsh language standards, of the existing strategy. So that's attached to Appendix B just for completeness. It hasn't changed very much since your committee saw it previously. Appendix C is also the strategy, again has been updated to reflect, the consultation and assessment updates, but substantively is the same document as you saw previously. And at this stage of the process, you'd expect us to be presenting inequalities impact assessment, and that's appended at Appendix E. But what I thought, with your permission, if you'd be happy for us to, is I'll hand over to Di. He'll walk us through a summary of the action plan, which is Appendix D, and that's really what brings the strategy alive in terms of our commitments over the next 5 years.
Over to you, Di.
Diolch yn fawr, noswaith dda pawb, good evening. Thanks for inviting me back to this fairly final stage of the process in getting a 5-year Welsh language promotion strategy for the Vale. As I've actually been in the meeting since it started at 5, and I think so much of what's reflected in these documents ties back with so much that's been discussed by the GLAM and the ethnic minority networks, as well as the participation strategy around consultation. As Thomas said, you can't please everyone, and some of the comments would have meant a recommendation not to comply with statutory duties, so that couldn't possibly be included in the final versions. With the consultation comments that we've had from the public, dealing with council officers, the Welsh Language Forum members, Forum Iaith, which are partner organisations of the council in the Vale, the final action plan has been developed, and I think is a lot more focused in so many ways compared with the previous 5-year plan that was put in place originally. That was very much it was the very first 5-year action plan that the council would have had. It was new for all 22 local authorities. This version has been updated to fit under the 3 themes of Welsh Government's Cymraeg 2050 legislation, and the existing theme action, from the previous version, and some of the new actions have been merged and put under the 3 themes that we have now, just so that it's easier for reporting. You'll see from the assessment that one of the things that I picked up on was that the Vale is very, very good at collecting data, but in some of the reports, different bits get reported in different ways to different people. So one of the recommendations that came out of that and has been reflected in the action plan is that there's a more of a focus to pull together all that data to be
presented in a consistent way. That's not just your target, of course, it's something for all the partners to contribute to, because even though the 5-year promotion strategy is the responsibility of the council, it's very much a partnership document. It has to be delivered by all your partners. No one organisation can do this. Probably of interest to this committee particularly is the fact that there's the right-hand column in the action plan didn't exist in the previous one. What we've done is added into this one links for each action to your corporate plan to show that the high-level strategic links and how the actions in the Welsh language plan contribute to your corporate objectives and well-being objectives. There's also far more focus on young adults, because the Welsh in Education Strategic Plan is the statutory age education Welsh language document, which is a separate document going through the approval process at the moment. So this document has focused more on young adults, retraining adults who are re-entering the workforce, for example. There's a much greater focus on Welsh as an employment skill, for example, than was in the previous version. One of the comments that came up last time, I believe one of the councillors mentioned it. I don't know if they're still watching this meeting at the moment, but it was around a concern that Welsh medium schools might not be monitoring pupils coming from ethnic minority backgrounds, and were there issues around how Welsh medium education was perceived by different groups in the community. So there are some of the actions in the new plan reflect that and try and get better data, better engagement. There are promotion targets around Welsh medium promotion in families that might be from different backgrounds. So we've tried to reflect a number of the consultation comments that came from councillors at the scrutiny committees as well, not just from the public consultation. The number of targets and actions in this plan are slightly less than previously. There's 38 in this compared with 45. That does not mean you're doing less. What's happened is, in restructuring the action plan from last time, a number of the actions under the previous 4 themes were very similar. So they've been thinned out and merged so that it's a much more focused document. As you'll see from the impact assessment as well, again, we've noted that the focus very much more is on young adults. There's greater links to protected characteristics. Welsh isn't one under legislation, but there are so many similarities in terms of raising awareness, staff training, that kind of thing. And we've linked in with employment issues because of the socio-economic duty. So the 5-year strategy and the action plan and the impact assessment are very much up-to-date documents now, and hopefully reflect as many as possible of the consultation comments that we were able to, as well as the legislative situation in 2022 compared with what it was in 2016. I'm happy to answer any questions any of you have on this. I don't know if Tom's got any additional comments to add to that.
No, I thought that was a really useful and comprehensive summary. Thank you, Di.
I've got Councillor John, first of all.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dim siarad Cymraeg, David. I've been on Welsh courses, and I've done probably a couple of years of Welsh courses. But the Welsh courses I find are fitted in with the school year. So when I got O-level Welsh when I was in grammar school as a kid. But when I came out from there, I never continued anything. I wish I had at the time. But a few years ago, I went on a course in the Vale, and it was excellent. The only problem is that you do 3 10-week courses. There's gaps in between for half term, end of term, etc. And the biggest thing is that if you're not from a Welsh family, you don't speak to anyone. The gaps are too wide. So subsequently, and then I had family problems which didn't allow me to continue on the next session. But I do think that it would help if they're fitted in to the school year, that at the end of that term, that you have sessions together, that you can get together and talk together as far as you've learnt the Welsh and expanded on that, because at the end of the school year, then you've got the summer holiday, you've got a 6 or 7 week break, and unless you're discussing or talking Welsh to someone or trying to talk Welsh, then it goes away from you. And of course, COVID hasn't helped some people, the gaps in between, but I do think that it's important that we, and I notice in this action plan, which I do like, is encouraging families to get together, because there is a perception from some parents, and I say some parents, that to go to a Welsh school, you get a better education. And that's why they send their child to Welsh school. They don't want to learn themselves. And I think that's important for the child to continue their education in Welsh, and for the parents to also learn the Welsh. So then you've got a family together speaking Welsh at home as well as turning to English. Because the easiest way, the thing about this as well, I find, is that if you're stuck to speak Welsh, or you're stuck to find a word to speak, you tend to switch to English quickly then. So it's important, I think, that I do like the action plan of getting families together. I mean, for example, from sport clubs, we got a sports club in our league, Club Cymric, and all their players speak in Welsh when they're playing. So the referee who can't speak Welsh, he's completely lost. But that's brilliant. But the thing is, I'm all for developing the Welsh language myself, but I do think we can probably pull things a bit together, that those are learning can continue during the interterm breaks, that they can get together and develop their Welsh, even if it costs the pupil more. Because as we're fitted into the school year, in July it says, well, hope to see you back in September. That's a long time then if you're not going to speak Welsh to anyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson, you can come in now, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just want to give along the ads, and I think that I saw this last week at Learning and Culture, so I mean it wasn't anything too new to me this week here. I think it's been very helpful as a process to go to both committees. The action plan, I think, does bring it to life and sort of and sharpens the focus in terms of what can be done in the next couple of years. I think building on as Di says, the previous presentations we've heard today, I think clearly the discussion with Welsh language groups in the Vale, I think, has been very helpful. It appears, as has some of the more informed responses to the consultation, and this actually is part of the question for consultation is sort of that wider level of when it's informed consultation. It's good when it's people mouthing off about something in which they're not particularly expert. Then maybe it's not so good and not so useful. A couple of just very quick points though. I mean, first of all, there is one issue that I find here is that really it still remains fairly generic. I mean, I do feel that these are a set of targets that could easily be placed in almost any majority English language local authority in Wales. So probably 12 or 13 places. If you replaced Vale Little Morgan, you could almost give them the same action plan and say, go off and do this. So there is a way of, I think, the council embedding this to make it feel sort of more local. There's a quick query I've got with regards to education and some of the action plans are about sort of identifying future need and things like that. I'm wondering, isn't Welsh Government policy these days really to actually be stimulating that need rather than assessing the relevant needs? So I'm sort of maybe worth clarifying about exactly what the requirement is. I appreciate that's covered by the WESP, but on the basis that it's included within here, I think those need to be aligned. So just a bit of clarification around that. The other is similarly on education basis. I can't find any reference within this document to say to RAG, Rieni dros Addysg Gymraeg, the Welsh Parents for Welsh Education. It's useful for us, I think Councillor Wilson and Councillor Sivignon, who raised this issue last time regarding deprivation and black and minority ethnic groups, that was part of their WESP contribution. I'm aware that they've had a change in manager in Cardiff of national RAG, but I do think that actually parental involvement in Welsh language education is an area that I think maybe is missing from this as a document. So one of the things that there are 7 Welsh medium schools within the Vale. Is there an opportunity, and obviously this isn't the Learning and Culture Committee, maybe I should have raised this last week, but is there an opportunity really for building or supporting a sort of a county-wide RAG group, which operates as a sort of not quite PTA, but operates in terms of those issues which are relevant to Welsh medium education that might otherwise not be given such prominence, and that includes things like school transport issues or movement from one form of education to the other, for example, from year 6 to year 7, primary, secondary, because of the different issues that those are facing. So I'm just wondering, thinking of that as a sort of a late matter for consideration. I appreciate we're at the end of the process, but just some of those issues, maybe could be teased out at some point. If not here, then in comments back to Cabinet. Obviously, I can see that Councillor Burnett is still listening to us as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I've got a few comments before I bring in David as well. I mean, I echo what Councillor Johnson was saying and Councillor John about the aspects in terms of parents being involved, especially parents who've got children at Welsh language provision schools. And I think that's important, that they don't feel alienated from the process if they come from an English-speaking background, that they feel that they can participate. And one of the criticisms I see on lots of SD reports, not just of English-speaking but Welsh-speaking schools, is that there's not enough people talking informally in the playground in the medium of Welsh. And that seems to come up quite a lot. So it indicates to me that perhaps in some settings, Welsh is regarded as the language to use formally in a formal setting of the institution inside the school. But outside the school, it's not. And that's interesting, because it means to me, and it then goes on to Councillor John's point about perhaps maybe we need to find more informal ways where people can speak Welsh informally. And I note that, there is a person I know very well in Penarth who does an awful lot of Welsh language training, but he mostly does it in informal settings. And I think this is the key, isn't it? Find people that are willing to do kind of sort of like informal social clubs in pubs, in restaurants, in those places where groups of people can get together and speak, kitchen Welsh, whatever you want to call it, conversational Welsh, so that people feel happy about speaking it in a way that people feel relaxed about it, and they're more likely to feel more confident about it. And I think that's the important thing here, because I think a lot of people are willing to have a go because they feel a bit embarrassed if they get something wrong. And I think that's always going to be an issue with any language, not just Welsh, but any language that is not your own. You think yourself you're going to make mistakes and therefore you're not going to try. So I think we need to encourage that. And I do think that could be extended also to areas of deprivation. I think that is important as well. So at the moment, I think in some, especially in Cardiff and the Vale to a certain extent, Welsh language is seen as a bit posh, as it were. It's seen as though, especially from English people, it's a move a step up to speak Welsh, as it were. It shouldn't be like that. It should be like in Blanefestiniog, where I've been. You go to a pub, everyone speaks Welsh because it's normal. It's what their language is about, and that's what I want to see in the Vale. I want to see in Cardiff. That's so anyone can do their shopping and everything else that way. And I'm glad that an awful lot of shops now have got these Welsh language signs, and I think we need to promote that a bit more amongst officers. I know we do, but even more than we do, and even amongst councillors. I know it's on the action plan. There's about councillor training on that, and I think that is really good. as well. But maybe we can do a bit of, training for councillors about speaking Welsh, even just small conversational stuff, especially for monoglots like myself. Okay, so can I thank you all very much. Dave, do you want to come in now or anything, Anton?
Yes, I've written a few notes. I think I can answer some of the questions that have been raised. Certainly the comments about Welsh being term time and not enough in the community is why under theme 2 of the action plan there are so many new or strengthened aspects around family and community use, particularly amongst young adults again, because often between the age of leaving school and maybe sort of like their mid-20s, a number of people do forget a lot of what they've learned during their statutory education period. But yeah, certainly that theme of increasing the use of Welsh is very much aimed at filling those gaps and making sure that Welsh isn't just the school language. So hopefully over the next sort of few years, as this plan is put into action, you will see those gaps being filled and that casual provision being added to the statutory side of things. The one comment Councillor Jones, I believe, made about dropping English words into Welsh, that happens a lot between people who do speak more than one language. Just so that you know, the technical term for that is code switching. I do it myself quite often, particularly late evenings on a rugby day, for example, but I won't go into the reasons why for that. Councillor Johnson mentioned this sort of generic side of some of the actions. That's very true. A lot of the councils where there is a lower percentage of Welsh speakers than others, there are similarities in a lot of the actions that are there, because every single one of the councils is going through the same process of increasing the population in terms of how many people are Welsh speaking. But that's one of the reasons under this action plan as well that we've added in a number of actions around partnership working, not just locally but regionally and nationally as well, so that you can copy good practice to, so hopefully within 5 years you'll see a lot more focused issues on that the Vale has achieved and can share good practice with others as well. One interesting point that was raised as well about FRAG. FRAG don't actually deliver Welsh language services to the public in the way that the partners that have been listed in the 5-year plan do. So I think that's why they haven't been named as a partner in that way, because then they wouldn't be responsible for delivering actions under the plan. But I do take the point, and it is possible, assuming everyone agrees to this, that FRAG could be added in as a potential partner to share information under those actions where we talk about promotion and marketing, for example, as opposed to actually delivering services. But I think that's why FRAG wasn't included in the first place. But, as I said, if people are happy with that, that can still get just tweaked and added to those promotional targets within the 5-year action plan. I think that covers everything that we were asked, but if there's anything I've missed, then please let me know.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm moving to recommendations. I think the points that we've made, if we can forward on to Cabinet, okay, that's my recommendation, as well as noting your reports, David, as well. Can I thank you very much, Guy, for your report? That was terrific. And can we move on to the next item on the agenda now? Okay.
Dr. Val, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Val, too. And the Vale Glamorgan Community Action Development Plan. Open to you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. So this is bringing to your committee the updated draft of the annual development, and actually it should be annual delivery plan on your agenda, yes, rather than development. But yes, this is bringing the annual delivery plan back to your committee. The point of the process that we're at currently is that we've completed the consultation on the draft for 2022 22-23, and that was developed in the autumn of last year, informed and underpinned by a series of data, legislation, our COVID recovery strategy, our reshaping programme, and we went out to consultation over the winter. That included taking the draft as it was to all scrutiny committees and also sharing it through a series of different forums and networks, as well as the public consultation. Just as a recap in terms of the purpose of the annual delivery plan, we have a 5-year corporate plan which sets out our vision, our values and our 4 wellbeing objectives, and in response to a call for more specific action to be identified each year, we've introduced an annual delivery plan. And that shows the commitments that collectively as council departments we're going to take in order to deliver wellbeing for our residents in the coming year. This year we've introduced 6 new themes that run throughout the annual delivery plan, and they're reflective of the circumstances we very much find ourselves in. So we've got a theme around Project Zero, our commitment to decarbonisation. We talked earlier about community capacity and empowerment, and there's a strong set of actions within that theme. There's also reflective perhaps of the socio-economic climate that we find ourselves in, a theme around providing support to those people who are suffering hardship, for example, in how we provide advice and support around money matters and education and skills and training. There are a series of actions within the draft plan around care and support for some of our most vulnerable residents, as well as a commitment around infrastructure, so things like 21st Century Schools programme, a response to the UK government Levelling Up programme, as well as then a theme finally around transformation, so how we change as an organisation in order that we're fit to provide services into the future. So the report that you've got this evening, Chair, is coming to your scrutiny committee for some pre-decision scrutiny. It sets out at Appendix B the consultation report, so it talks about the methods that we employed, the findings and the responses. It provides information about the consideration that scrutiny committees provided, the 88 responses to the public survey across the 6 themes. It also talks about the results of the Twitter polls and the comments on both Twitter and Facebook through the promotion of this work. Earlier on in the agenda, I mentioned the work with young people that we undertook in order to get a voice of young people, and their views are reflected within the consultation report itself. Appendix C to your report is the accompanying Equalities Impact Assessment. And then finally, Appendix A is the revised annual delivery plan that we're bringing to your committee for consideration this evening. And based on the feedback that we've had through that consultation process, we've shared all of that feedback with the strategic leadership team of the organisation and also circulated it to relevant officers so they can use that insight and intelligence when they're looking at future policy decisions that they're looking to take. We've talked this evening about the public participation strategy and the approval and consultation process that we're going through, and that reflects some of the commitments to engage further on things like the annual delivery plan. We've commenced the work that I mentioned earlier around exploring better ways to engage with young people on these kind of corporate issues, and we've committed that upon approval and endorsement by council, we'll produce an easy read version of the plan so that it's as accessible as it possibly can do. And we will, in recognition of some feedback through the consultation process, be highlighting some of the work specifically around partnership working within health and social care, because there was some feedback there that that people didn't know the extent of that work that was going on. There have been some changes and updates to the plan itself since you as a committee saw it last. So we've, for example, changed some of the tone in the forward and introductions to reflect very much the period of the pandemic that we find ourselves in, and also reflecting things like our budgetary position. We've also strengthened some of the commitments around engagement and consultation that we've discussed earlier on in the agenda today, and also incorporated further references to leisure activities in order that the actions within certainly Objective 3 in particular particular accurately reflect leisure within the context of culture and well-being as well. And also finally, within Objective 4, we had lots of feedback around the council's commitment to tree planting, and we've added a specific reference within that particular section. I'm conscious that the annual delivery plan is a big document, but the reason for bringing it to you this evening is to provide an opportunity for elected members now to share any final thoughts before it goes to Cabinet for their approval, and then Cabinet will look to refer it on to Council for a final decision in March, so that we can commence delivery from the 1st of April.
Thank you very much, Tom. On that, open to members now. Does anyone want to make a contribution? Councillor Johnson, and then Councillor John afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom, for the presentation there. Not really a question, more a comment sort of thing. Two points. One is I'm sure that the document is a lot more user-friendly than it was. However, I think it would have been helpful. I can't see any track changes, so I can't see what's actually changed in there. So I still just read a large list of bullet points, as it were. So I'm not sure what's actually changed since. It reads clearer than it does in my memory, but I can't see what that is. And I put that in the context of having 80 pages worth of material in this item, of which 20 odd pages are the actual document and 50 to 60 pages are the consultation responses and the equalities impact. I'm just a little concerned because I mean the same sort of thing happened in the previous item where we seem to have the same document, twice, once before and once after. That we're getting, because it's digital rather than we're printing out the bits of paper, that we're getting very, very large amounts of material through in each item. And I'm not sure that's necessarily the best way of being able to scrutinise these things. So I appreciate having the full access to all of the comments. I'm not sure that I'm any more the wiser as to what's changed in the actual document as a result of everything, because we can't see track changes there. Just one quick final point on the responses. We're again back into that public engagement discussion that we've been having for 2 hours now, about will actually have some of these responses been hijacked by people with specific agendas they want to push, and therefore is this a well-meaning and useful engagement exercise, or actually is it not that useful if somebody wants to just complain about something? Are we getting representative responses? To what extent should those responses be weighted against what we already know and what other experts say? So I think there's these are all the issues that relate to what public engagement could and should look like. How many people is representative? How many people makes it enough to go, actually should we be including this? And which bits of these things have we only got through doing this, or is this stuff that we already knew anyway? Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. And Gwyn, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one. I think it's a very good document, Tom. Excellent. Your team have worked really hard on this. But it's Objective 4, page 17. I don't expect an answer here, but it's about review and implement options for community organisations to operate facilities such as sports grounds, parks, open spaces, allotments, public conveniences as part of the council transformation programme. What I wanted to ask is, some of our public open spaces have come over as a result of 106 agreements with contractors building developments. So a lot of these public open spaces have come over like that. Have we got a responsibility that we've got to keep them as public open spaces to the public to walk? Or what can we do with them? Because I just wonder where we come with on this, because they were handed over for the public to exercise. Basically, it's part of the amount of development that went on at the time. So I'm just interested, because handing over land to private cricket, football, rugby clubs Is that right on public open space? Because people can say, oh, in a minute, I've got a right to walk here. So I don't expect an answer, but I think we need to look at that, because there is a difference, I think, between a ground that we've been looking after, which belongs to the council. Yes, the public open space that's come over from 106 belongs to the council, but do we have that responsibility to the general public so that they can walk their dogs or walk ever, you know? So I'm just interested in that line, basically. But thank you, Tom. Good document.
Okay, open to Tom now to respond.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Johnson initially for his thoughts. In terms of specific changes to the plan, they're highlighted at paragraph 215 of the covering report in terms of what specific changes to the plan that have been made. I do take the point on board in terms of how we're presenting volumes of information. Things like the annual delivery plan have statutory elements to them, so that, you know, they are documents that are weighty in their size, but actually, in order to make sure that members are able to scrutinise things, certainly that feedback is really useful, and certainly we can look to take that on board in terms of how we present the findings of things like consultation exercises in the future. And thank you for the recognition that the consultation report is really comprehensive. I was very keen in order that we did provide that transparency of showing all of those comments and trying to provide a bit of a summary at the beginning, in order that people can then also delve into the detail if they wanted to do that. And the point that Councillor Johnson made around was the consultation a purely representative exercise, and clearly with 88 respondents and 75 young people, that isn't necessarily representative. And the point is absolutely the one that he made, which is it's about early involvement and engagement in the development of the plan and the use of a range of data, insight and consultation findings on other exercises at the stage that we were at in the autumn, that I think is the really meaningful piece. This is where we're now consulting on, as he said, almost the final version of a document. And then in terms of Councillor John's query around the public open space provisions when we're looking at things like community asset transfer, or when we're looking at leasing or licence arrangements, if, with your permission, Chair, I can take that back for a specific query of my legal colleagues. But what I would say is that this action within that particular objective is broader, obviously, and as Councillor John recognises, it's broader than just public open space. This is about how we work with a range of community organisations and community groups in order to be able to operate services at a really local level that are responsive to local need, and that forms part of that sort of community capacity and community empowerment theme that is running strongly through this year's plan.
Okay, I haven't got any other speakers, so I'm going to make a recommendation that we endorse the annual delivery plan in its draft form and recommend it wholeheartedly to Cabinet. Okay, is everyone agreed with that? Anyone like to second that?
Second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, then we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is decision tracking. Okay, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I will obviously present that now. Bear with me a second. Yes, as committee will be aware, this is the report that we have to committee on a regular basis, on a quarterly basis. Essentially, the report advises members of progress in relation to the Scrutiny Committee's historical recommendations and the updated forward work programme schedule for 21-22. For the committee's consideration. As part of this report, we have two appendices. Appendix A relates to the third quarter recommendation tracking for October to December 2021. As can be seen, the recommendations or actions as part of that appendix have been completed based on the number of recommendations from the meetings in that period. Also, we have an updated committee forward work programme schedule for 21-22, which looks at the basically for the municipal year, the various reports and presentations that have been provided to the committee, and obviously the ones in the near future, and indicates any slippage or any changes as well within those. In terms of recommendations for committee tonight, we have two recommendations. First one being that the status of the actions listed in Appendix A to the report be agreed by committee if they are happy. And also recommendation number 2, that the updated committee forward work programme schedule attached to Appendix B be considered for approval and for uploading to the council's website. That really is, in a nutshell, a very brief overview of the report and the actions and forward work programme. So I'm more than happy to obviously take questions from the committee chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Any questions, any queries at all? Yes, Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, Chair, just looking to clarify that there's an item for March which is Vale of Glamorgan Annual Delivery Plan 22 to 23. Is that a different item to the delivery plan that we've just been discussing?
Open to you, Tom. Okay. Okay, Mark, could you make some queries on that, please?
Yes, bear with me, Chair. I'm just checking now. Available, yes, I can see now what obviously Councillor Johnson is referring to. Let me just double check. I don't know if that is perhaps been a slight administrative error, and that relates to obviously the report that's been presented tonight by Tom. I will double check that, Chair, and I'll obviously come back to the committee. Oh, bear with me. There is a message just come through from my colleague. Right. This what Councillor Johnson's referring to, the annual delivery plan. It was originally scheduled for March for Cabinet, but it was brought forward. So unfortunately, that's not been reflected in this forward work programme. It should reflect for February as opposed to March. So apologies for that error. We can obviously get that amended before it's uploaded if committee and you, Chair, are happy with that. Yeah, and obviously if Councillor Johnson is happy with that.
Well, obviously I'm happy with us being accurate. Just clarifying, in that case, the target plans, the service plans and target setting, that is coming next month as a separate document.
Yes.
Yeah, that should be the case, and obviously they'll be part of a general sort of suite of those type of reports going to scrutiny. So yeah, that will be a separate item, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Ian. Much appreciated. And can I thank you? I'm happy to endorse those two recommendations. Are we happy to do that?
Yeah, and what I can do, Chair, as well, I've obviously put for a recommendation to that we'll get it uploaded subject to the amendment that Councillor Johnson has pointed out. Okay,
thank you. Now going back to pay policy, I think relevant officers have left the meeting anyway, who obviously not part of this, but I think Leigh, for you presenting it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got the pay policy this evening. If you'd be pleased to know, it's only 16 pages, so we can get through this hopefully fairly swiftly. Just obviously, this is our annual pay policy. We've probably seen this quite a few times over the past few years, and actually been doing this since 2012. And I think as was taken on from Councillor Johnson's query earlier, I'll just go through a number of the amendments I think that we've made as part of the policy. to make it obviously up to date for 2022-23, and actually some changes potentially, I suppose, that have happened almost in the last couple of days that we may need to amend ready for publication on the 31st of March this year. So if I just highlight just a number of the paragraphs within the report, paragraph 1.5 within the Cabinet report itself, just on page 3, it still mentions about the pay negotiations are still ongoing for NJC staff. And again, as throughout the authority, that probably does affect the majority of workers within the council. We're talking about 4,000 staff that are under NJC terms and conditions. That pay award for them is still outstanding. Negotiations still happening nationally. You're probably fully aware of that, with the national bodies and the trade unions. And we're still awaiting on that news of what that pay award will look like, going back to obviously will be backdated to 1st of April 2021. I think the agreement at the moment is that it's sort of at that 1.75% increase that's been agreed by the employers, but we're still waiting on they say that agreement nationally. So we're just waiting on that. Actually, in the report, it does say that we were waiting notification on the NJC Chief Officer pay rise, but that came through a couple of days ago. So again, we can update the report before it goes to council. I say that pay award has come through at 1.5% for the Chief Officer population, and that again will be backdated to 1st of April 2021. If I just move on, and actually just before we released this report to go to Cabinet and Scrutiny now, we did have notification that the Chief Exec would have his award again 1.5% backdated to April. So in a way, it's a bit unfortunate really that the Chief Officer population have had their increase while we're waiting for the majority of the staff, but we're governed by what happens nationally, and we're obviously progressing matters that way. I think that's probably about the main issues, I think, in terms of the Cabinet report itself. If I actually move to the Appendix A, which is the employee pay policy, and just run through just a couple of the sort of new points or areas for comment. Actually going down to 4.3, most of the report is standard. So again, it's just picking out some issues. So 4.3, again, I suppose again it's just mentioning really we're still waiting for the NJC pay award. So again, those salaries that we're quoting for the staff are still based on April 2020 sort of figures. So again, just be mindful of that when we're talking about things sort of, you know, in terms of ratio of pay and gender pay gap. It's going to be a little bit out of sync when we've had some pay awards and not others until things catch up. I'm actually going to jump pretty much straight down to 6.8, because again we've talked about pay structures already as part of the NJC conditions. 6.8, again we're talking about pay structures for the Chief Exec and Chief Officers, and again which we've said now we're just had those pay awards through. In terms of 6.13, again we do this every time, it's just give a gender profile of the officers set out within the Chief Officer population. It stays fairly stable, to be honest, and you know, again, just slightly one more sort of male than female, as we're dealing with odd numbers of 49 officers within those groups. Although you'll be aware that we've got 2 new director jobs. We're still obviously in the process of longlisting and doing the interview process for those vacancies. So of course we'll add the 2 new sort of individuals into this chart at a later date when we have that information. But again, you know, I suppose that's, I think as a Chief Officer population, again having just over 50% male and just under 50% female is probably a different representation in terms of the council workforce, where we're probably talking about 70% sort of female and 30% male when you take into account the whole organisation, including schools. So that's where we are on that. Obviously 6.14 again gives the current sort of salary levels. The chief exec grade in there is the new level, because the pay awards was agreed just before the report was finalised. But again, all the role from director down to operations manager, they'll see an increase now of 1.5%, which we're just obviously organising that pay award at the moment. If I jump to 6.19, I think this was mentioned previously as well, probably last year, I think, in the discussions here at Scrutiny, that we've just given a table really as part of the assessment ratings that happen as part of the appraisal process for chief officers, and just an overview there really in terms of what the potential ratings are that happen following those reviews. Obviously, there's lots of discussions and things that happen as part of the chief officer appraisals, and again as part of that incremental progression that the heads of service and above get as part of their annual assessment, is that they won't progress beyond their sort of spinal point level 3 unless they get a good or excellent sort of rating. So again, it's just making you aware, I suppose, in terms of that assessment process as well for that chief officer group. I was going to move down to 6.29. In terms of election sort of payments, again, this section has been amended, again, only slightly, but again, just to reflect the fact that the chief executive was obviously designated as the proper officer for electoral registration and returning officer functions, and you're aware that obviously that came through cabinet and council earlier in the year, and so it's just really just keeping this policy fresh and up to date as we move through the changes. And then I think I was going to jump to section 7, very brief section 7 about the gender pay gap. I think we can probably do a lot more work on this, but I think it was just try and get something into this year, just to state that actually that we've had quite a good improvement in our gender pay gap reporting, that we've actually I suppose decreased or improved it from 8.8% down to 3.4% in the space of a 4-year period. Again, primarily due to the fact that we had amended our pay structure, again probably around that sort of 2018-19 sort of time scale, and I suppose it's like anything, is that we don't want to stop there. We've obviously amended. We don't use spinal point 1 as part of the council's grading structure, where a lot of other councils do, and I think that was a really good and I think brave move by the authority. And then we again gave additional headroom to some of our lower graded jobs, especially around that grade 4, grade 5 level. And again, there's a lot of, I suppose, from a gender perspective, a lot of female workers within those grading structure, especially again throughout the council. So again, that was a real improvement, I suppose, in terms of making those changes and therefore increasing our improvements in gender pay gap. It's probably stabilised a little bit, so I think there's some work again we need to do corporately. Again, is looking at our pay structure, looking at again the roles that we're trying to fill, a lot of potentially both male and female dominated roles, and trying to I suppose understand how we can get different groups to to apply and ultimately get appointed to those vacancies. And I think really, I suppose that was it. There was no other changes really in terms of the remainder of the report, and that stayed fairly stable. So I'm happy to stop there and over to members to ask any questions.
Thank you very much, Leigh, for that presentation of that. That's brilliant. Open to members. Anyone want to say anything? Yeah, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Laith. A couple of quick queries. Obviously, one of the issues is that this is, a moving situation. So we have to publish this, but there are ongoing negotiations which will change this. But I've just got a couple of points. Firstly, I think I've raised before that we've got a it's a reference to the sort of the heads of service, etc. I'm not even sure after years here exactly who is counted within that band and who counts as OM1. I think somewhere within the council website or whatever there should be a bit more kind of explanation as to who falls into these bands, because they are obviously well-paid members of the council, and I think that it should be easy to work out who they are. Later on, there's reference, and it's there every year, to re-employing previous employees from the council. I think it's been raised in this in this round of meetings before, but how frequently does that take place? Is that something that's just there as a contingency, to explain what we do, or is it something that actively happens on a regular basis? And the final question is about that gender pay gap. How is it calculated? I mean, is that done through a mean of salaries, or a median? What's the method for calculating that, especially when we look at substantial change within a couple of years? It's trying to understand, is that exactly what's happened to to generate that level of change. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think I've got anyone else wants to ask any questions. Leif, do you want to respond then?
Yes, thank you. In terms of where should we start with the first one? The level of jobs within the chief officer level. You're quite right. I think some information is included in the statement of accounts, but of course that is for roles generally over the 60,000 and above, and I think that's commented in there. There is some information, as you're quite right, probably on certain key roles, but I think that's something we can look at, Councillor Johnson, in terms of a bit more of an update of the roles and responsibilities within that.
Just explain briefly. I mean, I had a quick look on the the council's corporate pages, and you can see the chief executive, you can see the directors, and then you can see a number of people who presumably fall into the heads of service category, but that's not as many as 15. So it's about trying to understand, well, what is that level, because it feels like I could do with an organogram, basically what I'm saying, because I don't quite know who is at what level, or if I need to understand that, but it doesn't seem particularly clear who is at a heads of service level, who is at an OM level.
Fine. I think that's something we can build into future reports, but I'm sure we can add something like that in more detail. Yeah, thank you. In terms of the re-employment, I think you're quite right. That's probably something that we add as part of the pay policy that we have to comment on. Speaking from experience, obviously managing recruitment and stuff for the council, to be honest, we probably don't see a huge amount of re-employment through the council, or at least not within a short period of time of someone leaving and then coming back almost straight away, although sometimes that does happen, depending on where they've moved to, and obviously things happening that way. I can try and provide some context to see if I can give you some information, councillors, on maybe over the last sort of 12-18 months to see how many people have been re-employed, if that would be useful, just so we can get some context into what that looks like. So I can certainly provide that information. And the gender pay gap, yeah, you're quite right. There are quite specific sort of calculations that we have to follow. Again, this is national, so again, all organisations that provide this information have to follow certain guidelines. Now, the first one is that generally you're a public sector organisation that has 250 or more staff. Now, from a council perspective, schools are excluded from some of our gender pay gap reporting, because they're classed as obviously their own governing body, and therefore, unless they're a school with more than 250 staff, they wouldn't be required to be part of our figures. So it doesn't always give us the full picture from a whole council sort of perspective. And you're right, the main figure used is the mean or the average salary of staff. But actually, what we do with that is that even if you get a part-time member of staff, you would quote what their full-time equivalent salary would be. Otherwise, that does skew obviously figures sort of quite a lot. So I suppose that's where we are. It is an average sort of figure. And then it's just mainly, again, corporate services rather than schools that feature. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
Can I say something, Chair?
Of course you can, Pam.
Yeah, it's about the Equal Pay Act. It's been a long time coming. 52 years we've been working on this, and I'm glad to see it's narrowing ever since Barbara Castle introduced it in 1970 after the strike of the machinists in Ford. But we got to work on it. We're still battling out there to get women to achieve equal pay. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you mind if I comment on that, actually, because I think that's quite an important, I suppose, important statement, which we know that, and I think from a council perspective, we would argue, I suppose, that we do equal pay, because obviously if a male or a female undertake the same job, we've got job evaluation, we've assessed the jobs, and they get paid the same. And I think that confusion between gender pay gap and equal pay is sometimes blurred. But again, appreciate that the reason why the gender pay gap is there is because obviously there's more women in lower paid jobs than men, and I think that's where we're constantly trying to assess how we can level that. And I think we've made, again, huge improvements in a relatively short space of time. But again, we don't want to stop at 3.3%. We want to keep going and see how far we can get. Yeah,
that's great.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, my understanding is this report will now go to council for final consideration.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't think there's anything else on the agenda. Can I wish everyone to be safe tomorrow? Because obviously, I know there's been an email sent out to all members about what's going to happen tomorrow. So please be safe, everyone, and please hopefully you support your community, I'm sure, as you all do. And thank you all for coming tonight. And we've had a very interesting and quite different agenda tonight, and it's really, really good. And thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.